Alright guys, thank you so much. This is another video in our Kill Rationalism series. This will tentatively be Kill Rationalism Part 3. That depends if I'm going to go and rewatch Kill Rationalism Part 2, and if it doesn't hold up like my first one, then we might have to do a redo. I remain undaunted by the negative comments in my Kill Rationalism 1 video, which is good because I got a lot of views, but I also got a lot of negative comments, and I remain undaunted. I will not give up or capitulate because you don't like what I'm saying and you can't refute it. Now, in this video, we will be discussing the direct and, in my personal opinion, fascinating direct connections between the discovery of perspectivity and rationality. When I mentioned that in my first Kill Rationalism video, part 1, I mentioned that rationality was birthed from the discovery of perspectivity, or born from the discovery of perspectivity. Now, intuitively, that doesn't seem to make much sense. Like, what's the connection there? It seems like a far-reaching connection, and that's what I hope to explain in this video. And the whole goal of this video is for you to have a greater idea of perspective, and in turn, once you have a greater idea of how perspective works, you will have a greater understanding of how rationality works, both its efficient and deficient aspects. So without further ado, let's just get right into it. I really don't want this to be like an hour long. Okay, so what is perspectivity? What is the discovery of perspectivity? That would be the ability to render 3D objects or images on a 2D flat surface. So if you go back to 10,000 BC, you are not going to see perspectively correct paintings where there are, the Jesus, if we were painting Jesus, he is not a 6-foot man who is 2 inches taller than the 5'10" man. He is 30 feet, and his disciples or his converts or whatever, they're like 3 feet. It is not perspectively correct. When someone is further away and they look smaller, that doesn't really happen in those kind of paintings. But around the Renaissance and the ancient Greeks, of course, the pre-perspectival phase and the perspectival phase, all of a sudden we had this new power, the ability to render 3D objects or images on a 2D flat surface. Now, perspectivity works because of a vanishing point, and a vanishing point is an invisible and inferred point that confers order on what is being perceived. So the vanishing point is where all the major lines of, let's say, a frame in painting all converge at a certain point on the horizon line. Now, the horizon line is the line at its eye level, and you have to sort of find this. And the vanishing point is important because it's, as it said, it confers order on what is being perceived. Artists use the vanishing point to structure their paintings, their drawings, whatever it may be, so they can make sure that it is perspectively correct. So the vanishing point key, or the vanishing point is a key term that you have to understand. So where all the major lines in the frame converge on an invisible and inferred point that exists, though it is invisible and inferred, on the horizon line. And in doing so, it confers order on the frame or on the eye, so to speak. Now, this perspective and this vanishing point, quote unquote, opens up, if you will, meaning makes possible the ability to perceive in the sense that it allows for things to be perceived, but also closes space at the vanishing point. So what the vanishing point does, it closes space and limits space, but in doing so, whatever is perceived in that limited mode, that visual, whatever is encompassed visually, is conferred a greater clarity of perception or understanding. So the vanishing point is very important. It makes sure that I can pick up this mouse and I'm not going to move my hand that way or that way or that way, or I'm going to jump off a bridge or anything. It's right here. It's perspective. It's clear. Okay. Very, very, very important point. If you have to pause and rewind, please do. Now, let's use an example. And I would recommend, if you want, pause this and you can just go on Google Images, just look up vanishing point train tracks and you'll find it. So let's envision that I'm sitting on a train track. And of course, there's no trains coming, but I have one track on each side of me. So one on the left, one to the right. And I'm looking down, and to the side of me, there are these rows of trees, and it's a bright sunny day. There's a blue sky. So I'm looking. The lines, so to speak, the ones of the trees and the tracks, if I pay very close attention and if I just gaze forward, seem to ever so slightly curve. And then eventually they converge on the vanishing point. Now that could be the eye line, so maybe it's a horizon if I'm just looking out into the desert or on my train tracks, and there's no real buildings in the way. That's what I'm trying to say. So that's a good example. If you want to just go on Google Images and look up train track vanishing point, I'm sure you'll find it. Or if you want to go on YouTube and have a visual understanding and look up how does perspective work, you can do that. But the vanishing point is invisible and inferred, but nonetheless real. Just as real as the part is less than the whole. That is true. That is real. There's no getting around that. It is invisible. I can't tangibly grab on it, but it's real nonetheless. So if rationality was born from the discovery of perspectivity, we would expect to find similar patterns between the two domains. So the vanishing point, now again, is the invisible, inferred, but nonetheless real point that confers order on what is being perceived. That manifests itself in rational thought in the form of axioms and premises. So things like the law of, so let's get some examples. There's actually the vanishing point will manifest in all domains of rational thought, but we'll stick with logic for now, but we'll move on to more examples. So let's take logic for example. The laws of logic, these are vanishing points. The laws of logic, the law of cause and effect, the law of non-contradiction, the law of the excluded middle. They are invisible and inferred, but they are nonetheless real, just as the part is less than the whole, that is real, and that has been real since the world. You just have to think it first. The laws of logic are an invisible, inferred point that confers order on what is being considered. That is exactly the same function as the vanishing point in art or visual perception. Again, the laws of logic or the premises in a syllogism, so Socrates is a man, all men breathe, Socrates breathes. I'm actually going to bring that up in a little bit. Those are the vanishing point. So this is why people say, or Gebser might categorize rational thought more accurately as perspectival thought, because it is mirroring the pattern of perception that the eye does, that the functioning of the eye there. So again, I want to repeat because this is such a key point. I apologize if it's a little repetitive, but I just want to make sure that I'm giving it its due. The vanishing point in art is an invisible and inferred point that is nonetheless real, that confers order on what is being perceived. In rationality, the vanishing point, so to speak, manifests in the laws of logic or premises. So these are invisible and inferred points that confer order on what is being perceived rationally, what is being considered rationally. So that I think is pretty fascinating. Now, of course, it's not just logic. That's only the philosophical manifestation. So we have in science, we have in Newtonian physics back in the day, of course, with Newton, space and time were assumed to be an absolute background. Okay. And everything that Newton did was downstream from that starting point. That starting point is a vanishing point. It is the invisible, inferred point that confers order on what is being perceived, right? And of course, Einstein would go on later to say, no, your vanishing point is wrong, my friend. It's not an absolute space and time. We have a curved or relative, I don't know if Einstein actually liked that word, but relative space and time. So that's where you get these bombs in science. Now, in normal day-to-day thinking, we separate subject from object and assume a stable ego that can perceive and confer order on what is being perceived. So, of course, the ego, when I'm just going to work, when I'm at the grocery store, this is the vanishing point, that invisible, inferred thing that confers order. So I'm here, I'm me, I know what's happening to me. The ego allows me to act in the world, and that's the vanishing point. In language, of course, the vanishing point manifests in this idea that words have set meanings, sort of set, rigid meanings. That is the invisible inferred point that confers order on. So when we're actually speaking to one another and conversing with one another, we're not just scat singing and making crazy noises. That these words have definitions confers order on our use of language, and then that, of course, confers more order on the world. And then, of course, you also see this in math. with all the mathematical axioms and the geometrical axioms, like the um, oh god, like every right angle is a 90 degrees or something just basic like that. Invisible, inferred, that confers order. There you go. So we can see pretty cool manifestation, right? Pretty interesting idea. By the way, this is a spoiler if you're watching my Jean Gebser series. This is a little bit of a spoiler. So if you're interested in this stuff, keep watching. We got crazy stuff coming, I promise you. It's the part we're at now is actually probably the least profound parts. But now we're getting into time and then soul and spirit, and then we'll get into this. So that's one key way or one direct connection between the discovery of perspectivity and rational thought. So the vanishing point, its function, and its manifestation in the different modes of rational thought, the different forms. There's another that is also interesting. So the pattern of rational thought mirrors the pattern of perspective sight. So of course with perspective, the organ being emphasized here is of course the eyes. And when one is perceiving something, one is deploying a triangular function. So of course the eyes are separate. And then if I'm perceiving my mouse, let's see, hold on. What happens is the eyes form the base of the triangle and complete their synthesis of their simultaneous perception at the perspectival, vanishing point. So think about what's happening here. If you remember, we have two eyes, two antinomies, so to speak. They have separate sort of directions of perception that are distinct from one another and must be synthesized, and are synthesized by the vanishing point of what is being perceived. So two combined into one. If you remember in my Kill Rationalism part 1, what is the way that rationality brings objects in the world into relation with each other? It posits one thing that's quantifiably measurable and consciously known, and against another in a dualistic sense, and then invokes the third aspect of measuring thought to confer a directed judgment. So we have 1, 2, base of the triangle, complete the triangle with the synthesis. Left eye, 1, right eye, 2, synthesis completed based on the vanishing point hidden somewhere in what is being perceived. So the triangular thought of Aristotle, Plato, is mirrored in the triangular function of perception. We have the two eyes, they synthesize at a completed triangle. Pretty cool, right? So now we're just going to get into logic and its limitations real quick. So logic works when it can deduce a particular from a general, generally speaking. So let's do an example. All men breathe. Socrates is a man. Socrates breathes. Why is this good logic? This is good logic because one, it is presented in the triangular pattern. Of course, Socrates is a man. All men breathe. Socrates breathes. Okay? So we already have the triangle. Two, the vanishing point, so to speak. Socrates is a man. All men breathe. These are generally, unless you ask a postmodernist, and I'm being serious, Derrida would go to deconstruct these things. These are acceptable. People don't really deny this. It would be difficult to deny this in reality. So this is why Socrates, the logic around Socrates here is good, because the vanishing point, the invisible inferred point, i.e. the premise or axioms that we're starting with, are solid, foundational, are accurate, whatever word you want to use, robust. That's why we get good logic. So what's happened here? All men breathe. Socrates is a man. Socrates breathes. We've taken generals and we've deduced a particular. That's good logic. That's how logic is efficiently used. Now let's go the other way. Let's do inductive logic. Let's try to build from a particular to a general with logic. We get stuff like this. John drowned in a river. John is a man. All men will drown in rivers. This is, of course, not good logic. Now, this is an example of the limited validity of perspectival thinking. Limited. It is valid only where the conceptual field can be narrowed so as to permit deduction of the particular from the general. And this also mirrors perspective vision. If a single sector is to be perceived, it must be separated from the general field of vision. So when we're doing logical calculations, we're only doing a point at a time. We cannot logically or rationally consider everything all at once. It just doesn't work that way. And then, of course, with our eyes, we're not seeing the whole world. Obviously, there is a world outside of what can be encompassed visually. So, in the same way that rational thought limits itself to what is quantifiably measurable and consciously known, or limits itself to a particular part or aspect that it is rationally considering, the eye and its triangular function is also limited. The eyes would not be able to encompass the entire world. So what it does, it sort of compromises and it says, okay, well, I'll just give me a part of the world, but whatever is seen in that is afforded more clarity. And that's going to bring up to my last point. So what is the problem here? It's the same. Well, why is this in Kill Rationalism? I mean, this is cool and this is interesting, but what's the problem? It's kind of what I just explained. The same problem with our visual perception. Anything within its frame is understood clearly and accurately, but is inherently limited to either what can be encompassed visually or what can be encompassed by rational thought. So the same limitations of the eyes insofar as it is limited to a particular field of vision and it cannot encompass everything. That's the same thing with rationality, right? I mean, it limits itself to the realm of quantifiably measurable and consciously known. And then we see a further limitation where its efficient use seems to be deducing a particular from the general, not general from the particular. So I want you to understand, I think this could be a good way for you guys to have a greater understanding how rational thought, really perspectival thought, operates. It operates similar to the eye. So the eye kind of directs itself, right? It goes around and working with a limited part and confers greater clarity on what is being perceived. That's the same thing as rationality. It's limited and it's sort of direction based, but whatever it's considering, as I said, it's inherently limited, but working within those limitations, a higher degree of clarity is conferred by rational thought. Of course, as being against rationalists, that is amazing. We want to use this effectively and efficiently. We don't want to deploy this thought in areas where it doesn't belong. Nonetheless, if we can do it where it does belong, then we are going to be having a good time now, aren't we? So those were the direct connections between perspectivity, the discovery of perspectivity, and rationality. So I guess a quick summary, we have, let's see, okay, so the vanishing point, of course, the quick summary. Vanishing point is in art, it is the invisible and inferred point in which the lines converge at the horizon line, and in opening up space for things to be perceived, it also closes it, conferring order. So that is all to say, it's an invisible and inferred point that makes it so what you're seeing is actually clear, and it's not just this fuzzy nothing. If rationality was born from the discovery of perspectivity, we should see the vanishing point manifest here, and it does. The invisible inferred point that confers unity on what is being considered and manifests usually in the form of axioms, premises, or some sort of law of logic, or law. That's a good one. So that you can see, and that's when rational thought works best. When your vanishing point, so to speak, is rock solid. That's when you get the best out of rationality. And of course, as you get lost in the rational clouds, that becomes a problem. Your vanishing point becomes more subjective. You don't want that. And then, of course, the second point is the pattern of rational thought mirrors the pattern of perspectival sight. The pattern of rational thought is a triangular thought with the two bases of the triangle, completed, of course, by the third synthesis. Same thing with the eyes. Eyes are separate. They have separate perceptive abilities, and they must be synthesized. And they are synthesized at the vanishing point in what is being seen. So that's pretty cool. And then, of course, we have logic and its limitations. Logic works best when it can deduce a particular from the general, and it struggles when it tries to deduce a general from a particular. I actually wrote a Substack article about this called, it was titled Bridging the Is-Ought quote gap. And this is why I think there's two big reasons why I think rationalists really struggle with this. Is and should are separate. They deploy logic efficiently to deduce what is. Not only are we in the world of what is quantifiably measurable and consciously known, but we can, again, we're deducing particulars from generals. So in this particular instance, let's be rational. They use it efficiently. So they use rationality and logic deductively, efficiently, great. But then they go to should, and should is about building. So um, they deploy logic inductively. And just like the John drowned in a river example, they run into problems. And then another big problem, obviously, is that if they're trying to bridge the gap, which is just space, by the way, they will never be able to do so with rational thought because rational thought necessitates the gap to function. You can never bridge a gap with a mode of thought that necessitates the gap to exist and function. It's just not going to work. So that'll be the end on. One last thing. This took me about 3.5 hours to really work out. Not today. I was able to put this together in just a couple of minutes. But when I got to this part in Gebser, it took me a really long time. And I have to say, Gebser really, I think this is the one point in the book where I don't think he explains himself very clearly. So I had to use other sources and all that stuff. And the reason I say that is because I want to encourage you. I'm really not a genius. I know all this stuff makes me sound smarter than I am, but it's only because I've taken the time um, to understand this. And if you guys haven't done that yet because you've never heard of Gebser or you just don't have the time, well, yeah. So some of this stuff can be a little up there. Please just take it slowly. There's no need to. Hopefully I did a sufficient job explaining it clearly and slowly, and just challenge yourself and don't don't beat yourself up if you hear this stuff and it doesn't click with you right away, because it didn't click with me right away. And that's part of the fun. You have to really try it, and the soul sort of is carried forward by trying to figure these things out. It shows persistence and desire. So that'll be where we end it all, or where we end this video. We're going to continue this series. New subscribers, I love you guys. Thank you guys for coming. And I hope you guys stick around, and we will see you guys in the next video. I'm not sure what that'll be, but it'll be something good. So I'm thinking about how America is built upon rationality and how it could be destroyed by rationalism. But who knows? You guys are the best. I hope you guys are thriving. If you're interested in just hearing me talk about movies, I just did a Blu-ray movie collection thing. So have fun. Love you guys. All right. Thank you.